Hey YouTube, welcome to the shed. I bought one of these new Vulcan welding machines from Harbor Freight, the Vulcan ProTIG 200. And let me start out by saying I'm not an expert TIG welder. I can do it, but there's way more that I don't know about TIG than what I do know. I'm just a regular guy who does a little welding, and I'm pretty sure that's who these machines are aimed at. Up till now, Harbor Freight welding machines have been kind of considered a joke. You know, there certainly wasn't anything you'd do any serious work with. But now they're telling us that they've really stepped up their game with these new machines. And I've had this thing for a few days now, and I tend to agree with that. It took me a while to buy one though. There's just not much information about them out there. When I started thinking about getting one, I went online to try to learn the details, you know, things like the ranges for the different adjustments and the duty cycle for something other than max current. I couldn't find this stuff anywhere. I even downloaded the manual and it's not in there. I did buy one though, so now I have all those answers. Okay, the amperage range for TIG is 10 to 200 amps, AC or DC. Which is kind of good because some of these inverter machines won't turn down that far on AC. And I might want to weld some really thin aluminum sometime. The pulse rate's adjustable from 1 to 200 hertz. Now with some of these other inverter machines, it's common to have a lot more pulse adjustments than just the rate. But I really kind of prefer this setup because there's going to be a learning curve involved with figuring out all those controls. I just want simple controls that work, and I think these do. The AC balance adjusts from 50 to 90% electrode negative. I think that's a pretty useful range. It covers everything I'm going to do. The AC frequency is adjustable from 50 to 150 hertz. I think that range is kind of narrow. I think more room on both ends would be a little bit better. For stick welding, the range is from 10 to 170 amps. Let's talk about the duty cycle. If you want the details, here's the tag. The duty cycle is a weakness for this machine. It's 25% wide open for TIG and 20% for stick welding. And now I know that's the same as the Lincoln consumer TIG welder, but that machine has a bad duty cycle too. The online competition, at least the ones I was considering, Everlast and AHP, are much stronger. They both have 60% duty cycles at maximum current. For what I do around here, the duty cycle of the Vulcan is adequate, but it's definitely a limitation. There are other compelling reasons to buy this machine though. That is, if you can live with the duty cycle. But we'll get around to that later. All the standard accessories are included, plus enough tungsten to get you started. And I'm pretty sure tungsten's not included with most TIG machines. The Tig Torch seems serviceable. It comes with everything you need to get started, you know, collets, cups, and such as that. And as I mentioned just now, tungsten comes with 1 each, 1/16, 3/32 and 1/8. The hose is 12 foot long. The foot pedal seems nice. It's made out of steel and seems sturdy. I don't know what's inside, you know, could be junk, but the outside looks good. But the cable for this thing is 24 foot long. I don't know where they think you're going to put the foot pedal where it needs a 24-foot cable. There's a 10-foot stick welding lead with a serviceable rod holder. You're not going to use it for heavy-duty welding, but you're not going to use this machine for heavy-duty welding either. The ground clamp, it's the best I've ever seen with a cheap welding machine like this. The contacts are copper, the spring is firm, and just overall it just feels sturdy. Now it does come with a regulator rather than a flow meter. If I was a serious TIG welder, I'd buy myself a flow meter, but I'm not a serious TIG welder, so this will do. Let's go out to the shop and look at this thing.
I really like the controls in this thing. They're actually just what I want. Simple and effective.
Okay, this is the selection knob. You just turn it to whatever adjustment you want to make and then adjust that setting with the settings knob. It couldn't be easier.
Pretty much everybody who buys an AC/DC TIG welder buys it so they can weld aluminum. Before I got this machine, it had been years since I TIG welded, and back then I was using a transformer machine without much control over the AC, and I had a lot of trouble welding aluminum. But with this machine, I don't have any trouble at all. I actually find it about as easy as steel. I don't know if it's the AC adjustments on the Vulcan or if it's the instructional videos I've watched on YouTube since then. Probably a little of both. The point is though, this machine really welds aluminum well, and it performs just as well with steel on DC. There's actually not a single thing I can complain about with this machine as a TIG welder. Not even the duty cycle, because nothing I'm going to be doing is ever going to run this thing up against the duty cycle. As a stick welder, it's not as good. I mean, it welds fine, actually well. But if you've got some serious welding to do, and you want to run 70/18 or any rod larger than 1/8, then the duty cycle is going to be a problem at some point. I ran some 1/8 70/18 on 1/4 inch steel, flat position, at 150 amps. Now I like it kind of warm, so that really lines up with the amperage charts pretty well. The thing is that my Everlast PowerArc 200 makes that same weld at 120 amps. The Everlast display may not be accurate, I don't know, because 150 amps does fit the manufacturer's recommendations. But all that really doesn't matter anyway. The point is that 1/8 70/18 is going to put you on a pretty short duty cycle. So if you have something where you're going to have to just keep pouring rods in, then you're going to spend some time waiting on your welding machine to cool down. And forget about running 5/32 70/18. You'll be maxed out and running cold a lot of the time. I don't use 70/18 much though. At least 90% of my stick welding is done with 6011s. I really consider those to be the best general purpose welding rod. You can do just about anything with them, and they're easy to weld with. Also, they don't take as much current as 70/18, so the duty cycle is not going to be as big a problem. And this machine runs them well. I was running at 120 amps with 1/8 rods on 1/4 inch flat steel, which is still higher than I would have to turn the Everlast machine, but it's in a reasonable place on the duty cycle. Will the Vulcan run 6010s? It's a known thing that inverter machines have a lot of trouble running 6010s. There's not enough arc force on most of them. This machine's no exception. I can weld with them, but they flame out now and then, and I certainly wouldn't buy this machine if I was going to run a lot of 6010s. So overall, the Vulcan is a very good TIG welder, in my opinion, that will also do stick welding. And it stick welds well if you stay within its limits. And since I use mostly 6010s and don't do any heavy duty welding, then this machine should work fine for me as a stick welder.
There is one thing I really wish the Vulcan had that it doesn't though. That's the ability to weld in 4T mode. 4T, if you don't know what it is, it's where you use a switch on the torch rather than the pedal. And there are times that really would come in handy. Even with the short duty cycle and lack of 4T, there are things that make this welder stand out from the competition. First of all, the price. The price is good. It's way better than the Lincoln that Harbor Freight likes to compare it to. But you can go online and find more capable welders for a similar price. But these next two things are huge. Number one, it has a 1-year money-back guarantee. Nobody else does that. Number two, you can return it to the store if you have trouble. And that's a huge advantage over buying a welder online. If you have to send a machine back that you bought online, it's going to cost you around $100 to ship it. I think that's universal. I don't think any of these online companies pay for the shipping to return a bad machine. And some of these companies have terrible customer service reputations. The internet is littered with reviews where people bought welders online that died within the return period and they weren't able to return them. If you read the reviews on some of these welders you buy on the internet, it's really scary. That actually stopped me from buying a TIG welder for about a year until Harbor Freight came out with these Vulcan machines. Some online companies do have a pretty good reputation though. I do own an Everlast that I bought online, but their 200 amp AC/DC TIG machine is quite a bit more expensive than the Vulcan. So, you know, the Vulcan's as cheap as buying a generic welder online, but you can return it to a real store, just like a much more expensive name brand. And something none of them have other than Harbor Freight is that you can return it for a full year. That's big. I really like this machine. I love it as a TIG machine, and it'll do as a stick welder. Its stick welding capability is pretty limited, but I don't expect those limits to be a problem for what I do. If I was welding for a living, I'd definitely make a different choice. I'd spend thousands rather than hundreds on my welding machine. Since I don't, I think the Vulcan is a good choice, you know, at least for me. However, if this thing goes south later, I will be doing a follow-up. Hey, thanks for watching my video. If you liked it, hit the thumbs up. It really does help.